take this different. Okay. Today is January 27th, 2014. I'm Jean Richardson, and I'm sitting here with Darlene Prashak. Prashak. Say it again.
Pray and then you're shocked.
Prashak. Okay. And thank you so much, Darlene, for doing this for us. We really appreciate it. We might also mention that the wind chill today is minus 35 degrees, but it's toasty warm in here. First, tell us where and when did you attend country school?
I attended that Mariposa number 6, Barrett School. I think I have all this written down right here.
Okay.
Do I have that written down here? Maybe I don't. But I was 5 years old and I was born in 1927.
How many years did you go to this school?
All 9. Kindergarten.
How far? Go ahead.
And I was the only one in my class all those years.
Oh my goodness.
And I always told my husband I was the smartest kid in my class, and he finally asked me one day how many were in your class, and I told him just me.
How far away did you and your family live?
It was a little less than 1/4 of a mile.
Do you remember any tasks that you had to perform before you went to school?
No, I don't. My sister and I always had to make our bed, brush our teeth, and all that before we go to school.
And what did you wear?
We wore dresses. And then we had snow pants that if it was cold, we'd pull that on over the top.
Do you remember anything special, winter clothing?
Well, I know
The snow pants.
Snow pants were just kind of coming. Some of the girls wore like overalls over their dresses, and I always felt good. I had snow pants, snowsuit.
Do you remember what time you would have left for school?
Yes, I think it was about 8:30.
And how did you get there?
I walked, and I always walked. And I'd say to Mom or Dad, well, my mom did drive. I'd say to Dad, well, some kids get ride to school, but he said you need the exercise. That will keep you healthy.
Do you remember anything about those walks?
Sometimes the snow was deeper than our overshoes.
Then I got into the boots.
Yes.
Did you? So you had your sister to walk with most of the time?
Well, no, she was 7 years older than I was, so we're a lot of distance.
So you walked by yourself?
No, well, there were neighbor kids. One family, the Westons, had 2 kids in school, and then the Johnson family had 2 kids in school. And Bob Johnson was the oldest kid in the school, and he was really good to little kindergartner kids. He'd take our hand if the snow was deep, and he was nice to us.
Tell us about your schoolhouse and its surroundings. Maybe this would be a good time for us to look at your plot map there.
The school sat right there on the corner of, it's section 14, and the school was right there on that corner.
Okay, and this is Mariposa.
Mariposa Township.
Okay.
And this was a main road right there, and the school sat on that corner, and I lived right there, farms. The school was on the corner of my dad's farm.
Okay, all right. And then we wanted to mention about the, when it was built. That was
And
built
I always knew that that wasn't the original school, but I just now found that it was built in 1925. So it was built just a few years before I was born.
Okay. Okay. Describe your schoolhouse and its surroundings.
Well, it just sat on a, and I always remembered, we sort of had a bigger schoolyard than some schools, and I kind of came to the conclusion there was a ridge across the school, and I wonder if that old first school maybe sat on a smaller plot of land, and that maybe this one where that ridge was, then we had, on the north side of that, we could even have a baseball diamond. And I always just, and we had it that if the big kids hit the ball too hard and if it went over the ridge, then they were out. So the big kids knew not to hit it so far that the little kids couldn't stop the ball. But I don't know for sure, but I've always wondered about that ridge, but now I started thinking about it, and I bet that was extra land where they set the school.
Okay, so you had your playground with the ball diamond. Anything else you can
We had a
remember?
merry-go-round, and we had teeter-totter,
A flagpole?
yes. No, we didn't have a flagpole. We put the flag on there was a place on the front of the school that we,
So it hung off the building?
yes.
And we have a couple outhouses?
No, this school had indoor bathroom. We didn't have running water. We had pump, but the boys' bathroom and the girls' bathroom, they were inside, but there was a big tank down underneath, and that tank had to be cleaned twice a year, I think. But we felt like we were pretty up class that we didn't have to go outside.
Did you have a well then? If you did,
Yes, there was a well there. And so the bigger kids would fill up a water bucket and bring it in for drinking water.
what did you do once you arrived at school?
Well, I guess we put our lunch pail on a shelf and took off our, if it was nice, we'd go outside and play for a little bit, and if it wasn't, we could come in and put puzzle together or read a book or something till it was time for 9 o'clock.
So what did you do upon entering the school?
You mean during the school time?
Once you got there.
All right, well, we want to do it till 9 o'clock, and then we said flag salute. And now this, I remember we had a prayer. That would not be allowed today, but I remember the teacher would pray a little short prayer.
Let's talk about the inside of this building. What do you remember?
Well, it was pretty nice. We walked in the door, and there was a big hallway and that's where we took off our overshoes and put them in a row there. And then to the right, there was the boys' cloakroom, where there was a place for the boys to hang their coats, and then there was a stall for them to use. And then there was another cloakroom for the girls, and we hung up our coats. And that was another little room with our bathroom in it, where the stool was.
What kinds of things were in your classroom? Did you have a Victrola,
Yes,
a piano,
yes,
a sand table,
yes,
and of course desk?
yes.
What were they like?
Blackboard.
Blackboard.
Yeah, we had them. Well, they were, you sat on your seat, and then the part that you wrote on was the back of the seat in front of you.
And how many on a seat? Did you all have your own seat?
We had one to a seat.
What kinds of supplies did your school have?
Well, a blackboard and chalk, and we had,
And books?
yes, there were like cupboards, doors on them. That was the library, and there were World Book encyclopedias, I remember for sure. And then just a variety of other books. I don't know where the other books all came from, but they were there.
Do you think they might have changed, that they might have come from the county superintendent's office?
Well, yes, I think some of them did.
What kinds of things did you and your family have to furnish? Pencils or
Yes, well, yeah, our pencils.
crayons?
Crayons, yes. Little scissors,
Tablets?
tablets, yes. Always had a pencil box, to hold the pencils.
Ink?
And I don't recall, there was an inkwell on the desk, but I think we didn't use it, because that was too messy, I think. I think we all had to bring our own drinking cup to school. We didn't have paper cups or anything like that. We all had to bring our own paper cup, or our own tin cups, or I think kind of a tin cup.
Where did you get these items that you furnished, your paper and crayons?
Well, there wasn't any store there, but we were between Newton and Marshalltown. And we shopped in both of those towns, and they both had dime stores, and I think we could buy everything we needed at the dime store, Kresge's.
So your school day started at 9 o'clock,
Yes,
and you said the pledge and your prayer. Any songs?
yes, sometimes we'd sing some songs. It seemed like there was 15 minutes opening exercises, I think we called it. 15 minutes for opening exercises.
So, okay, now you're in your seats, opening exercises are over. What happens now?
Well, it was reading. That first period, the recesses, let's see, recess was from 10, classes started at 9, 10 to 10:30 was that period, and that was all reading, the first period. And then then we had a little short recess, and then that next period was all arithmetic, math. And I always felt that country school was pretty good in some ways because you heard the same material over and over and over for each class. And if you kind of forgot what you learned last year, you'd have a chance to hear it all over again.
The teacher has reading for all grades
Yes,
before recess.
yes, that was all reading.
And then she meets with all the grades after recess with math.
But she would call each class up separate, and she'd have little chairs sitting there by her desk, and she'd listen to each class read.
Do you remember any activities, any special lessons? You must remember reading with her.
Yes, well, and then the next period was all arithmetic. And the young kids had these cards, addition cards, flashcards, yeah. And, you know, I think of all the different ages, but we were also helpful to each other. And sometimes the older kids used the flashcards, go out in the hall and help with but we all worked together.
What were your favorite subjects?
I loved spelling. The spelling was always real easy for me. I loved reading. And, well, I think I did okay in school, but math just wasn't one of my favorite things. Now I know I wish I liked math better.
So I can say math was your least favorite. You wouldn't have had much interaction with other students if you were the only student all the
That's
time.
right. So,
Did the teacher ever have any helpers?
yes, I wished I would have said something else about this book. We now have a grandson whose wife teaches school in Ankeny, and she loves this book, and she wants to be sure that that's her book someday, because it tells all the duties that the teachers had in this book. And she will look at this and she'll say, look, they even washed the windows, washed the curtains, swept the floors, all the cleaning of the school. And we all took it for granted because that's the way it was in all of them.
Do you remember any specific rules in the classroom?
Well, I think when the teacher had class up, I think we had around 15 to 17 kids in school. And so when she had a class up, we weren't supposed to interrupt that class for questions, but when she was done with between each class, we'd have a chance to ask her questions without interrupting who she had been helping.
Do you remember any discipline techniques the teacher would have had to reinforce her rules?
That hall that we came in first, there was a little chair out there. And if you misbehaved, the worst thing that could happen to you, you had to go sit on that chair in the hall.
Did you ever end up on the chair in the hall?
I don't remember that I ever did. Now, I'm sure I probably did sometime, but it didn't stick with me.
How did you know it was time for lunch?
We had a clock on the wall. We all learned to tell time by looking at the clock, and we knew that recesses were 15 minutes long, and
And you brought your lunch in a pail.
yes,
What did you carry in it?
it was always the same, a sandwich and fresh fruit, apple, orange, banana. Guys, it was about those three things what I had in it. And then we always had a little cookie or some little sweet thing.
Where did you keep those lunch pails?
Well, this first room that we came into, which was called that front entry, and the cloakrooms went off of that, had a cupboard, had shelves in it, and we all had a place to put our lunch pail on the shelf there
Where did you eat your lunch?
at our desk. And our teacher got this, and we had a furnace in the basement of our school. We didn't have a heating stove, we had a furnace. And the heat really came up in the register. And if we wanted something that was kind of warm, we could have a little container and sit it on the register. And it got warm.
Hot lunch.
And we all had to watch it. If for any reason anyone took their shoes off, well, don't step on the register. Sometimes kids came to school and their shoes were wet or something, and the teacher would tell us to take off our shoes till they got dry. And we'd take off the shoes and set them on that register too, but boy, we didn't step on the register when we didn't have our shoes on.
You only do it once. Did your lunch compare very much with the other students?
Yes.
How long was lunchtime?
Well, I think it was an hour. I think from 12 to 1.
So
A lot of the kids brought boiled eggs in their lunch because living on a farm, we all had boiled eggs, but I didn't like cold boiled eggs then, so I don't think and we had a thermos, so Mom would put soup in a thermos bottle. Little thermos bottle fit right in my dinner pail.
What did you do at recess time?
Well, if it was nice, we played baseball. We had a nice basement under our school too. I guess I forgot to mention that. And there was a big room down there that was just a basement room, and we could go down in the basement if it was so cold we didn't go outside. And I remember we had hopscotch drawn on the floor of that basement. That was one of the favorite things to do. We could all do that together. And we made up our own kind of rules for according to how old you were. The little kids, would get to start kind of in the middle or something. We all did it together, and we all figured it all out without much help from the teacher. She'd tell us to get this worked out, and we did.
How did the country school day end?
Well, it was 4 o'clock. We had to put everything away, and we had to pick up any pieces of paper or anything that was on the floor, and be sure it was neat around our desk. And it seemed like we said something all together at the end of the day, but I do not remember what it was. And then we all went out to this big hall where the cloakrooms were off for each side and got ourselves fun. And the teacher would stand at the door and check to be sure that we had our scarves on and our mittens on and our overshoes, and that we were put together right before we went outside when it was cold.
Did you have lots of different teachers during these 9 years?
No, I didn't. Boy, when I open this book to that page, and I've got a photo album here that one of our teachers gave all of us a little photo album for a Christmas present one year. And it has this picture of the school, and this teacher was Jessie Murphy. And I think I had 4 different teachers.
So you had Jessie Murphy.
I think my beginning year was Nadine Clement. And Nadine Clement, and then next one I think was Myrtle Loopy.
Loopy, L-U-P-E-E.
E-E.
Okay.
And wait a minute, it was Isabel Bodley in there someplace too.
Bodley, B-O.
D-L-E-Y. She was the one that gave us this book, I think. No, this was Jessie Gifford gave us this book.
Oh, Jessie, I have Gifford. Jessie Gifford, okay.
The reason I said Murphy is because she got married after school was over, and her name was Murphy then.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Nadine Clement, let's see, is that 4?
That's 4.
Yeah.
So Nadine's first, and then Myrtle, and then
No,
Isabel
Nadine Clement, I think, was first.
first, and then Myrtle,
Yeah.
and then
Jessie Gifford, I think, was the last one
the
I
last
had.
one. So we'll make Isabel the 3rd one, and Jessie the 4th one.
And I remember Jessie because she helped, I know we're going to talk about those 8th grade examinations, and she helped me study for that. I know
So we
this.
do know she was the last
So
one.
I do know she was the last one because of that.
Okay. What can you tell us about these teachers, about how they looked physically or their teaching styles?
Well, seemed to me, I had real respect for them. They always dressed nice and looked nice, and they were kind, but they could be pretty harsh when they needed to be too. I've analyzed this when you have a room full of kids, all ages, and one teacher, and how peaceful and helpful everyone was of each other and consideration for each other. And I don't remember that we ever talked about that was important. It just happened. It's just the way we were. But this whole community out there, we all went to the same church together, to the same school together. Our parents worked together. And I always felt like it was a really good education.
Did you have a favorite
Favorite
among these teachers?
Well, yeah, gee, right now I just think of each one of them. And I think my least that I liked was this first one I had, but see, I didn't know what to expect or something, maybe. But I liked them all.
Where did they live?
Well, they were from, I think most of them grew up in Jasper County, but they roomed with somebody in the community from Sunday night till, and I think Jessie Murphy was the one that she stayed with us after my sister went away to school, to college. Then we had an extra bedroom, and so then we had a teacher for a while.
So you would have seen her a lot outside the school day.
Yeah.
How about the others? Did you see them much outside of the school day?
Well, this was a close-knit community, and we had a real strong PTA, Parent Teacher Association. And everybody came to PTA, and it seemed like we did it almost every other week, but surely we didn't do it that often. And PTA they'd have a little business meeting, and everybody would, well, they'd send notes around, but people would be a pie night or cake night, or we'd have refreshments, and we sang. And I remember one of the kids in school were the Gill kids, and their dad, Tony, was a real good singer, so he always led the singing. And we always sang the Battle Hymn of Republic. And then people could say what songs they liked, and we sang a lot.
You had to clean up your classroom at the end of the day. Did you have any other jobs to do to help keep up the classroom?
Well, I remember we had to clap the erasers, took them outside and hit them together. Yeah, we had our duties. And it seemed like they changed from week to week. You'd have a week where you washed the blackboards at night. That was one duty. Another duty was pat the erasers. And we often had plants in the room, and we'd have to water the plants. And empty waste paper baskets at the end of the day.
Where would you have emptied them?
You know, I don't know. It seemed like there was one big waste paper basket, and we all emptied the other little waste paper baskets all in the big waste paper basket. But I don't know what happened to it after we put it in there. I don't know where it went, really.
Well, let's talk about that 8th grade exam.
All right.
And you said that Jessie helped you.
Yes. And I would stay after school at nights in my 8th grade for several weeks before it was time for me to write that 8th grade examination. We had a county superintendent, and she came and visited all the schools. And the first one I remember was Lucy Hall, and she was a person that we just all feared. And when the teacher would say, "Oh, students, Lucy Hall just pulled in the driveway," boy, we all knew we better be at our best. And then the second school superintendent we had was Ellen Hartnett. I remember her.
Hartnett.
I think it was one word, Hartnett, yeah. And in the whole township, there was just one other gal and I that were in 8th grade. And sometimes there'd be a whole bunch, so then they'd do it at different schools. So we had to go to the courthouse in Newton and write our 8th grade examinations. And that one gal that I didn't know very well until we did our 8th grade examinations lives here in Cedar Falls. And she's Sid Morris's wife, Elvira Morris.
I need to interview her too.
Oh, you did?
I need to.
Yeah. But she was at, not our school, but another school, and so, but she and I both had to go to Newton and write 8th grade examinations because there weren't any more kids there. But then now, she and I, we see each other all the time now and talk a lot.
Did you have an 8th grade graduation ceremony?
Yes. And I had looked for it, and I know I have a picture of that 8th grade. It was in Newton. And it seems like it was at the courthouse. And I know there was a picture of all of us outside of the Newton, Jasper County Courthouse in Newton. And there was a bunch of us who graduated from 8th grade. Had to have a new dress and shoes and everything.
Do you remember your dress?
Yeah, I think it was just a plain cotton pink and white striped dress, but it was a boughten dress. It wasn't a homemade dress. And I liked it.
Do you remember anything about this ceremony?
No, it was in the middle of the morning, it seemed like. And I think, in here, it was written by one of my cousin's wives, and she said the most scary thing was that we all had to stand on a set of bleachers, and Lucy Hall, our school superintendent that everybody was afraid of, or now mine was Ellen Hartnett, that they were there, and said I think I was more fearful of standing on the bleachers with the superintendent what was going on when they took the picture. But I can't find, and I know I have a picture of that ceremony, but if I had a little more time I could find it because I got a lot of stuff.
Do you have any idea how many kids would have graduated?
Well, it seemed like it was a big bunch.
Who went to the graduation?
Well, our parents, families, were graduates. And the picture of all of us was taken outside, so I don't know if the whole ceremony was outside. It might have been.
And then you went to high school,
And then I went to Kellogg High School.
Kellogg High School. Let's talk right now about your mother wanting her normal training. She can't get it at
Kellogg,
Kellogg High School. So she goes to
Grinnell.
Here's her picture. She and her
And if
sister.
they went to Grinnell High School, they could get their normal training certificate. Let's see where would I lay that?
Oh yes, we need to see that.
Where would we lay that?
It was too big for that. It couldn't get lost very easy,
No,
could it?
no.
There, here it is.
There. There it is, yeah. And this is and so my mom just went 2 years in high school in Grinnell, and her sister did too. And this is the high school diploma that they gave her. Here's Mom's name, Bertie Bertha Anderson. And the date on this is 8th day of June, 1917.
Okay. And we'll see who signed it too. Then it was a MD.
Yeah.
The president must have been the president of the school board.
Yeah. S.C. Buck.
And then the secretary.
Mm-hmm. Well, here's the superintendent's name over here.
Oh, and the superintendent was Eugene
Hanley, I think.
Hanley.
Mm-hmm.
And the principal was,
Charles B.
is that Bill or Belf?
Belf, I think
Belf.
it is. Something like that. But then, so my mother graduated in 1917, and I figured out that she was only 18 or 19 years old when she
Started teaching.
school, at country school. But she never taught at the country school where I attended. Her folks lived in Kellogg, so it was some schools. I remember Mom used to show us there. I taught at that school one time, but there's other country schools she taught at. And then my dad came home from World War I, and they got married, and so she didn't teach school anymore.
You've talked about what a close-knit community this was. Do you remember any community politics that would have affected the operation of the school?
No, there was always, had to have a director. But really nobody wanted the job being the director, and they just work at trying to talk somebody into being the director for a couple of years, and everybody has to take their turn. And I remember Dad he was director a couple of years. And really, I think the director's job was to be sure that coal got ordered and put in the basement for the school year. And I don't know what they did. But it was the teacher, and then the director, and then the county superintendent.
So, and you talked about the very active PTA and how they were involved with the school. So, did they raise money for the school?
I don't think so. I think it was just a social event. But and we had the big Christmas Day program. And we drew names for gifts. And it was a potluck dinner. And we always had the last day of school picnic too. And I remember that was a big deal because Dad would be planting corn. And since it's set on our farm, Dad would just pull up to the fence and climb over and come for the last day of school picnic.
What did you do once you left school at the end of the day? Did you have chores to go home to?
I don't think so. I don't think I did. You know, help mom set the table and get supper and help do dishes. And, our school operated kind of like our homes. Nobody questioned if they were doing too much or too little. Everybody just did what needed doing.
Did you have homework?
No, the teacher didn't want us to take homework home because we were supposed to do our homework when another class was there. And if we'd have taken it home and had that all done, then we'd been not knowing what to do with ourselves, where she was. We had plenty of time. Each class came up a little bit, and we had plenty of time where all those other students were up there to do our schoolwork.
Do you remember any major, local, national, or world events happening during your school
The
years?
only thing I remember is that we always talked about November 11th, Armistice Day.
Would have been pretty fresh right then.
Yes, and my dad had been in France and awful part of it.
Would you say that World War I affected the school at all?
No, I don't think so because it was over.
How about the Depression?
Yes, my dad owned the farm that was just south of the school. And he had bought that farm from my aunt and uncle. And he couldn't make the payment. And so my aunt and uncle just says, well, we'll take it back, because then the price of farmland just went berserk down. So right around the corner, then another farm. And Maynard and I even talked about it. How could he lose one farm one day and about 2 months later turn around and buy another one? But that was the way it was, because he'd paid way too much for the first one and he couldn't make the payment.